All right, so we're back and ready for another deep dive, and this time, we're taking on The Lost Boy.
Picking up where a child called it left off,
Exactly, and we're moving from surviving horrific abuse to navigating the foster care system as a teenager.
which is a whole other beast.
Oh yeah, it's like going from one challenge straight into a whole new set of unknowns.
Absolutely. And we're lucky enough to have excerpts from the book itself, so we're really getting Dave's story in his own words.
Raw and unfiltered. It's heavy stuff.
It is The Lost Boy shifts the focus in a really fascinating way. It becomes less about the abuse itself and more about the long and complex journey of healing and finding where you belong.
The title itself kind of says it all, huh?
Right there, The Lost Boy. That sense of displacement, the search for an identity, for somewhere to fit in.
You don't just bounce back from that kind of trauma overnight.
No, you don't. And the thing is, he's carrying so much baggage with him, guilt, shame, fear. You can practically feel it radiating off the page.
A constant state of distrust.
Yeah, always waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Well, the book drops us right into 12-year-old Dave's world at the start. He's free from his mother, finally, but
But there's this overwhelming sense of being unmoored.
like he's traded one prison for another.
And that's something that research on childhood trauma shows time and time again.
Escaping the situation doesn't erase the damage.
Not at all the fear of rejection, that constant expectation of more pain, it becomes ingrained.
A part of who you are.
Sadly, yes.
So he lands in the foster care system and, well, it's anything but a smooth ride.
We see him bouncing between different foster homes, each one with its own little quirks, its own rules, its own cast of characters.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
Imagine constantly having to adapt, never knowing if you'll be accepted or rejected.
Or how long you'll even be there.
Exactly. It's like a breeding ground for anxiety,
And he's craving stability so badly.
but it always seems just out of reach.
And then to make things even worse, he gets labeled the problem child by some adults who completely misinterpret his behavior.
Right? Instead of seeing a traumatized kid who's just trying to protect himself, they see disruption defiance.
All the things that make people want to push him away.
Sadly, yes. And it just reinforces that feeling of being damaged goods,
Like he's not worthy of love or belonging.
Exactly. And it's so interesting to see how that plays out in his relationships. He desperately wants connection, but at the same time, he seems to sabotage himself at every turn.
It's almost like he's trying to confirm his own negative beliefs.
Like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, isn't there a psychological term for that?
There is. It's heartbreaking to watch it unfold. He pushes people away before they can hurt him, before they can abandon him.
Because in his mind, they're going to do it anyway, right?
And it's this vicious cycle. He expects rejection, so he acts in ways that make rejection more likely.
And all this is happening while he's trying to navigate school, dealing with bullies, social isolation.
A lot for anyone to handle, let alone a kid who's already been through so much.
But there's another layer here, too. He's not just passively accepting this label of problem child.
No, he's not. There are moments of defiance of anger
It's like he's clinging to that anger.
as a way to hold on to some sense of control.
It's the only power he has left.
Yeah, it's his way of saying, I may be broken, but I'm not going to let you break me any further.
Powerful stuff, and it really highlights the complexity of trauma.
How it can manifest in so many different ways.
For Dave, it seems like that anger is both destructive and protective.
Absolutely. It pushes people away,
Yeah.
but it also keeps him from completely crumbling under the weight of his pain.
So he's constantly pushing and pulling, wanting connection, but also terrified of it.
All while trying to assert himself in a world that keeps telling him he's worthless.
A recipe for disaster.
And yet, amidst all this darkness, there's these little glimmers of hope that start to emerge.
Like the kindness of certain foster parents or the mentors who step in to guide him.
Exactly. These are the people who see past that problem child label.
They see Dave's potential.
And they become these crucial anchors in his life, showing him that maybe, just maybe, he is worthy of love and belonging.
However fleeting those connections must have felt so powerful for him.
Like little lifelines in a stormy sea.
And we see that in moments like when a counselor tells him, your past doesn't define your future.
Such a simple message, but so profound.
Especially at that age.
Absolutely. It's like planting a seed of hope.
But even with these positive influences, he's still battling those deep-seated feelings of worthlessness.
All that baggage from his past. It doesn't just disappear overnight.
It manifests in different ways. He feels like a burden. He constantly fears abandonment.
Which explains why he acts out, sometimes skipping school, stealing.
He's not just being a delinquent, though, right?
It's deeper than that. It's a cry for attention. A way to test the limits of those relationships.
to see if they're strong enough to withstand his pain.
Exactly. And it gets even more complex because on top of all of this, he's still holding on to this hope that his biological family will somehow come back into the picture.
He wants that happy ending, even though logically he knows it's probably not going to happen.
That hope can be so powerful it blinds us to reality.
It fuels that denial, that desperate clinging to the possibility that things might magically change. It's heartbreaking. This kid who's been through so much is still holding on to this sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, his mother will have a change of heart, or his father will miraculously reappear and rescue him.
It speaks to that fundamental human need for love and belonging, even when it's clear that those needs might not be met in the way we expect.
And this sets the stage for one of the most pivotal moments in the book, Dave's visit with his mother.
Oh yeah, that's a collision of hope and reality waiting to happen.
It's bound to be explosive.
But before we get into that, I think it's important to step back for a moment and look at the bigger picture.
The broader challenges facing kids in the foster care system.
Because Dave's story, as powerful as it is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. One of the biggest challenges is the instability.
Moving from home to home.
Exactly. Think about it. Frequent moves, new caregivers, new rules, new schools every time.
It's like you never have a chance to put down roots.
To feel like you belong.
And the research shows just how damaging that can be.
These kids are way more likely to fall behind in school, to have emotional and behavioral problems.
Even to end up in the justice system.
It's a vicious cycle. Trauma leads to instability. Instability just makes the trauma worse.
And then they get labeled as problem children.
Which makes it that much harder to find a stable placement.
So the system is almost set up to fail these kids.
Instead of supporting them.
And it's not just about the system itself, right?
No, it's about the people in the system, the foster parents.
They're dealing with so much.
They really are often incredibly dedicated individuals, but the burnout rate is sky high.
It's got to be tough.
Imagine pouring your heart and soul into caring for a child who might be gone in a few months.
It's a recipe for heartbreak.
And then you have to factor in the biological family.
That adds another layer of complexity.
There's this constant push and pull between keeping kids connected to their families of origin
and protecting them from further harm.
It's a tough balancing act.
Which brings us back to Dave and that visit with his mother.
Oh yeah, he's holding on to so much hope.
That she'll apologize, that she'll change.
That maybe they can have some kind of relationship.
But what happens is almost like a textbook example of how hope can backfire.
It can be a blessing and a curse.
Because she doesn't give him what he needs, right?
Not even close. The visit starts with this awkward attempt at normalcy.
Like they're strangers.
Small talk about the weather, what Dave's been up to.
But there's this huge elephant in the room.
All that unspoken pain, the years of abuse, the broken promises.
And Dave's a mess emotionally. He's excited to see his mom, but terrified of being hurt again.
It's a lot for a kid to process.
Does his mother even acknowledge the abuse?
She does, but not in a way that's helpful.
Not taking responsibility.
Instead, she tries to justify it.
Blaming him.
Saying he provoked her.
Classic victim blaming.
So damaging, especially for a child who's already internalized that message.
And that's the moment Dave's hope shatters.
The rug is pulled out from under him.
He has to face the reality that his mother isn't capable of giving him what he needs.
It's a crushing realization.
But it's also a turning point.
He starts to let go of that fantasy of a happy family reunion.
And focuses on building a future for himself.
Independent of his biological family.
And this shift in mindset fuels his resilience.
He throws himself into school. His grades improve.
Remember how we talked about his anger?
Being both destructive and protective.
He starts channeling that energy into something positive.
He joins the track team.
Finds an outlet for all that pent-up emotion.
He pushes himself to his limits.
And excels.
It's more than just physical exercise, though.
It's discipline. It's purpose.
And it's through track that he starts to form these positive relationships.
With his teammates and coaches.
He's building a support system outside of the foster care system.
A sense of community that he's been craving.
He's starting to see that he has value.
That he's capable of achieving great things.
It's not a straight line, of course.
There are setbacks.
Moments of doubt and despair.
But ultimately, his story is one of hope and triumph.
He may not have a traditional family.
But he creates his own chosen family.
Through the bonds he forms with foster parents, mentors, friends.
It's like he's piecing together a sense of belonging.
From these fragments of kindness and support that he's received along the way.
And it's so powerful to see how these seemingly small acts of kindness.
A listening ear. A word of encouragement
A belief in his potential.
can have such a profound impact on his life.
And I think that speaks to something really important about resilience.
It's not just about some innate quality.
It's about the interplay between individual strength and the support we receive from others.
We all need connection,
We need to feel seen and valued.
and those needs can be met in so many different ways.
So The Lost Boy isn't just a story of individual triumph.
It's a story about the power of human connection,
And it challenges us to ask ourselves how we can be that source of connection for others.
especially those who are struggling, who feel lost and alone.
It's a reminder that even small acts of kindness can have a ripple effect.
A listening ear, a word of encouragement, a simple act of support.
It can make all the difference in someone's life.
And it's a call to action, too,
To advocate for systemic change.
to push for policies and programs that actually support children in foster care.
To create a more equitable and compassionate society.
For everyone,
Because ultimately it's about recognizing the humanity in each other.
especially those who are most vulnerable.
And believing that everyone, regardless of their past, deserves a chance to find their way home. You know, it's easy to get lost in the statistics, the policy debates, all that.
The big picture stuff.
Right, but The Lost Boy, it brings it all back down to earth.
To the human level,
We're talking about real kids.
with real struggles, real hopes, real dreams.
And it sticks with you.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's the power of memoir, you know?
It lets us step into someone else's shoes, walk a mile in their world.
And in Dave's case, those shoes have seen a lot of rough terrain.
That's what makes his story so compelling, though, right?
Absolutely. He's not a superhero. He's just a kid who's been dealt a really bad hand.
But he doesn't give up.
He fights. He struggles. He makes mistakes. But he keeps moving forward.
And he shows us how resilient the human spirit can be.
Even in the face of unimaginable trauma.
There's still that capacity for hope, for growth, for healing.
And for connection.
Mm-hmm.
Remember how we talked about how important those positive relationships
They weren't just nice to have. They were essential.
like lifelines.
Exactly. It makes you wonder how many other kids are out there struggling without those lifelines.
So many. It's a sobering thought.
It's a call to action, too, isn't it?
We can't just sit back and expect someone else to fix the system.
We all have a responsibility here.
But it can feel so overwhelming. Where do we even start?
Right. It's such a big problem.
I think the key is to focus on what we can control.
What we can do as individuals.
We can educate ourselves.
Mhm.
We can support organizations that are helping these kids.
We can volunteer our time.
We can donate money.
We can be that listening ear, that shoulder to cry on, that source of encouragement for someone who needs it.
Even small acts of kindness can make a difference.
Absolutely. And those small acts can ripple outwards.
Imagine if everyone listening right now committed to doing just one thing to help.
The impact would be huge.
It really would.
So The Lost Boy isn't just about one kid's journey through the system. It's a challenge to all of us.
It's a mirror reflecting back at us, asking, what are you going to do to make a difference?
Will you be the person who offers a lifeline?
Or will you stand by and watch someone drown?
That's a powerful question.
And I hope it stays with our listeners.
Me too, because ultimately this isn't just about Dave's story.
It's about the story we're all writing together.
The kind of world we want to leave behind.
For our children, for our grandchildren.
A world where every child has a safe and loving home.
Where trauma doesn't define a life.
Where hope triumphs over adversity.
That's a story worth fighting for.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So that wraps up our deep dive into The Lost Boy.
It's been a privilege exploring this one with you.
To our listeners, we hope this has given you something to think about, something to feel.
And something to do.
Until next time, keep diving deep.